Following on from my video on how to analyse prose, it's only natural I do one on how to analyse poetry too. Especially because it's a bane for so many people. Let's just jump right in. Now, because poems are generally shorter than a novel, I'm only doing 5 tips because, yeah, those will be sufficient. Anywho, the first tip is to learn the terms. Just as with prose, if not even more importantly, you need to know the different terms for poetic techniques. I didn't really understand like iambic pentameter, no matter how many times it was explained to me. I just didn't get it, and I had to do my own research multiple times and learn about the different meters, learn about different rhythms, because I love to go back to rhythms since it's so simple, and learn the different ways that people can rhyme things, whether it's a half rhyme or an embedded line, embedded rhyme. And I can talk about that, especially if it's like a half rhyme and then the poet is rhyming the word love only half with his wife's name, because then you could be like, oh, he only like half loves her or something like that. You can always find something to analyze if you know the proper terms. Again, type it into Google. There are so many good websites where you can just find the different terms. There are an overwhelming amount. You don't need to know all of them, just pick the ones that you think are most likely to come up and that you're most confident writing about. Number 2, the YouTube and the internet. Use them, especially YouTube, because you have channels like Mr. Bruff that I used so much, because many times he will analyze popular poems and put them on his channel, and loads of people do that as well. I don't know all of their names because like I was just in revise mode and I just click on them, I didn't look at their names, but Mr. Bruff I came back to. And the internet as well, just like with prose, there will be articles written about specific poems, and different ones will focus on a different line. Maybe it's a specific line that you don't understand, or give a different interpretation of that line that can help you with your analysing. 3, don't just analyze line for line. This is similar to the macro versus micro analysis. Sometimes it's good to zoom in line for line just so you can get an overall understanding, but then look at the poem as a whole, because it is a body of work that's meant to be read conjunctively, and sometimes you'll get a completely different understanding of the text if you do that. It might be good to combine both methods and then talk about what the reader might perceive if they just read this line, and then how the author changes that in the next line, and that can deepen your analysis further. Number 4, know the author. Again, this is mainly if it's scene poetry. The context can change the meaning entirely. If the poem was written shortly after a loved one passed, or it was written in wartime, or about a specific struggle, it can be crucial to your understanding of the poem. You don't necessarily need to know the year, the date, the month that the author was born, when they died. I say author, kind of an author. Or even their gender, because in my actual English poetry exam, I got the gender of the poet wrong, and that was crucial to the meaning of the poem because I was talking about conventional love, but it was gay love, so that would have changed the meaning entirely. However, I still got 4 marks, so some mistakes you can make. Sometimes context isn't that important, but it can really help you find things to analyze. If it's unseen poetry, then you can still be prepared by knowing the different time periods. I always went back to the Romantic era because it came up so many times. The 1800s, I knew if there was a romantic poem, then they would be using loads of nature, metaphors and imagery, because they were obsessed with the sublime at that time. And in the Victorian era, you'd need to know what kind of poems were written then. That's also something you can't really skip. Learn it, it's so helpful. And that links to number 5, form and structure. Sometimes this is the hardest part to analyze, but it can be very useful. You can look at the pacing of the poem. What are they talking about in each stanza? Are they going about it in chronological order or not, and why not? You can also look at the form of it. Is it a Shakespearean sonnet or an Italian sonnet? that matters, why they're using that particular sonnet form, if they're subverting the sonnet form in any way. I know I spoke about this, I think with Carolyn Duffy, and she used a sonnet but she subverted it, and we were talking about how that could relate back to the fact that she's a lesbian, and most times the love poems were written for heterosexual love, but she was subverting that to fit her love. You can go like so deep with form and structure, just like that. Also, the poem is written about time, and then the structure is in a sand timer. You can use that to say how the poet might be suggesting that time is as inescapable from this poem and is so embedded in even its form as it is in life. And you can just like go off on a tangent, as us English students tend to do. Anyway, those are my tips, but I have more for you. I'm going to show you 2 books. Let me get them. Okay, this one is How to Read a Poem by Terry Eagleton. He's showing all of the book, and I'll just read the blurb because it explains it amazingly. On the whole, students today are not taught how to be sensitive to language, how to read a poem with due attention to its tone, mood, pitch, pace, rhythm, and texture, rather than just to what it says. And that's what this book focuses on. It goes deep into what the difference between poetry and prose is, and it can also serve for finding unseen poetry. I didn't read it, but I'm sure if I did, it would have helped me a lot. And the second thing, this one is specifically for unseen poetry, is this bad boy, the Norton Anthology of Poetry. And it's huge. This is the 5th edition. It has a bunch of poems in it, and this was advice given to me when I thought I was going to be applying to uni to study English, because you sometimes have to take an exam where you have to analyse poetry. When I went to the Cambridge Summer School, a student told me that she flicked through this and would just pick a poem and start to analyse it. That broadened her knowledge of different poems, so that when she went into the unseen poetry, she kind of had seen a lot of them, known the typical authors. I keep saying authors. She was more prepared for unseen poetry because she'd seen more of them and knew more of the poets and their different styles, and it also just improved your analysis skills on a whole. Now, that's not it. I decided to show you my analysis of one of my poems from A-level. Again, this is one by Carolyn Duffy because I gave away my other poetry anthology and I have her poems on my Kindle, so I just have it. And this one is White Writing, is part of her anthology Feminine Gospels, which are all about poems about women. And you can link the title of the anthology back into the poem that you're reading. So the one that I picked, White Writing, is about her love for her partner. And you can say that links back to the overall title of the anthology. It's Feminine Gospels, and she's talking to all females, redefining what it means to be feminine. And she's writing this poem about marriage as if maybe it's a proposal, which is typically a man's role, and you can say that she's changing that in her poem. Overall, if we look at the poem, I'll put it up on the screen, we can see that there are 6 stanzas, which is an even number, and each stanza is roughly the same length. They all have the same structure, it's all pretty consistent, and you could say that links back to her love for her partner, for their relationship, how it plans to last for a long time, that this poem structure could continue and go on and remain pretty much the same, just as maybe Duffy hopes their relationship would. So it's White Writing. No vows written to wed you, I write them white. My lips on yours lighten the soft hours of our married years. No prayers written to bless you, I write them white. Your soul aflame, bright in the window of your maiden name. No laws written to guard you, I write them white. Your hand in mine, palm against palm, lifeline, heart line. No rules written to guide you, I write them white. Words on a wind, rain? Words on the wind, traced with a stick where we walk on the sand. No news written to tell you, I write it white. Foam on a wave, as we lift up our skirts in the sea, wade. See, last gold sun behind clouds, inked water in moonlight. No poems written to praise you, I write them white. If we delve deeper into the language, we can see that it starts off with no vows written to wed you, no prayers written to bless you. It's all written in the same structure, and it gives a kind of circular vibe to the poem. Don't use vibe in your exam. Sorry, let me think of another word. Circular imagery, again relating to the fact that this could potentially be never ending. You can also maybe delve deeper and say that the structure in her poem and the consistency with it becomes the norm for the poem, just as maybe she's trying to normalize homosexual relationships. That might be going too deep. Who knows if you'd be able to even find something to support that, but that just came to my head now. One of the key themes of this poem is the fact that it is so ironic and contradictory, especially the last stanza, the last 2 lines where it says, no poems written to praise you, I write them white. So those last 2 lines are particularly contradictory because this is a poem written to praise her partner, and it makes us question the statement in the poem. Is she actually writing all of these things white? Which she's not, because the poem itself is actually written in black ink, and so that highlights the innate contradictory nature of this poem from the very way that it is scripted. And it could be a comment on the fact that maybe she doesn't want to write white. It could be a comment on the fact that Duffy doesn't want to write it white, she wants to write it bold, but society still doesn't accept it, and so they have to pretend as if it doesn't exist. Such as the first line, no vows written to wed you, that could relate to the fact that gay marriage was illegal for so long. And that's where you can use the context of the author, of the time it's written, and of the general societal opinions that can relate to the poem specifically. But that was basically my overview. I haven't analysed every single line, as you can see. It's only, there we go. It's only a few lines that are highlighted, and because it's on my Kindle, it looks neater. But when I write on a poem, when I'm analysing it, I will have different colours for different things. So form might be red, and rhythm might be blue, and then I will write it, I will highlight the words that rhyme, I will talk about why those specific rhymes matter, I will talk about the form, and I will highlight the lines that I'm most likely to use as a quote and explain why. It's basically plopping all my ideas in a stream of mess, and I love it. And writing things down definitely helps me remember it, so I preferred to use paper, but I mean, Kindle, I got the book for free, so I was going to use the Kindle. Anyway, that is my tips on how to analyse poetry. I really hope that it has helped you guys. And again, if you guys have any tips, then put them down in the comments, share them, help everyone else out, because, you know, studying can be a lonely road, and we want to make it a collective one. You can quote me on that. Anyway, that's all from me, and hopefully I'll see you in my next one. Peace.